Hey guys, welcome to our first AP Biology virtual lesson of the year. Before I start, I just want to preface this by saying this is the first time I've used a stylus for writing on these things, so bear with me, it might not be seamless to start. Chapter 3 is on water, mostly on the properties of water, which you guys have learned a little bit about from your classmates by now. Um, awesome presentations, and hopefully you learned a little bit. Probably a lot about your specific property. What we find is you end up learning a lot about the property that you specifically were in charge of, but the ones that other students did, you probably aren't as confident on. Before I move on, you guys have access to this presentation. I highly, 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 highly recommend that you watch the videos that are embedded. So this Bozeman biology video, if we were in class, we would be watching that. So watch that video. It's a nice man named Mr. Anderson. You might as well get used to him this year. You'll be seeing a lot of him. He's really, really, really good on his videos explain things probably better than I ever could. So use that. Now, just to kind of think back, think about when you were maybe a freshman learning about the water properties, or when you were, refreshing your brains when you were looking through them. Think about this. What do you recall about water? What is it made of? What are its properties? Why is it important? And maybe anything that might come to mind with water. Obviously, a really, really important molecule, obviously. So I'm just going to pause for a couple seconds. Think about water. Think about those three questions there. All right. So hopefully you were able to remember a little bit of something about water, and hopefully we'll refresh you on the rest. Obviously, one of the most important molecules in all of life. No life can exist without any water. Some need more than others, but water is a biological medium, and all living organisms require water. So, like I said, everything living requires it. It's about 3/4 of the Earth's surface, and actually, very, very little of the water on Earth is useful to us as humans. Only about 2% of the water on Earth is fresh water, and even most of that is frozen. So, we have a very, very less than 1% of the fresh water on Earth is useful for humans. So, it's an interesting fact. Water facts. Polarity. Now, here's where you should have out. Let me see if I can exit out of here and show you what I want you to have open. So, if you guys go to this document, it was shared on your Canvas. I'll give you a little bit of time to open that up. I want you to use this to help yourself take notes. And if you don't want to type it on here, you want to do a similar diagram in your notebooks, that's fine. Just make sure you get this stuff written down or typed down somewhere that you can access it, because this is really what's important. We're going to go through all these properties and show both what the property is and then also its importance to life. So have that out. This is what I would use to take notes during this presentation. So if I go back here now, okay. So the polarity of water results from hydrogen bonding. Now, what is a hydrogen bond? Well, the group that presented in the last couple of days did a great job. But just to reiterate what a hydrogen bond is, it's basically it's a weak attraction between the hydrogens of one water molecule that have a positive charge and the oxygen of another water molecule that has a negative charge. Opposites attract. That results in hydrogen bonding. This is by far the most important property of water. It's also, I would say, the property of water that students struggle with the most. So Label a water molecule showing its polarity. So just to show you this, here's where I'm going to use my stylus, so hopefully I can do this here. So we have oxygen, this big oxygen atom. That was a bad color to pick. Oxygen there. And oxygen, if you remember anything from chemistry, is highly electronegative. And being highly electronegative, it hogs electrons. Now, if you remember on the previous slide, I said oxygen is negatively charged. Well, if you think about it, what is the charge of an electron? Well, negative. So it makes sense that if oxygen hogs electrons, it would have a negative charge. Okay, so same thing here. Water is H2O, right? So these have to be hydrogen ions. And if oxygen is hogging their electrons, they have lost their charge, making them positive. Okay, so we have that two sides of the water molecule are opposite. So we have a positive charge over here, negative charge over here. Okay, so let me see if I can figure out this eraser now. Oh, I hope I can make that bigger. It didn't work. There's got to be a better way to erase. I'll do some more research on this, so hopefully we don't have to waste as much time. Sorry about this, guys. We'll get better at this, I hope. And I'm sure you hope. All right. Go back to my mouse. All right. All right, so water's polarity allows basically water molecules to form what we call a hydrogen bond. So these dotted lines and right in here, those are a hydrogen bond. Notice it's between the oxygen of one water molecule and the hydrogen of another. Those dotted lines are what we always use to represent a hydrogen bond. It just shows it's a weak attraction between those water molecules. Opposites attract. So if I were to draw a hydrogen bond between these, I would draw it from this negative oxygen to this positive hydrogen. So positive, negative. All right, so all those opposites attract. Okay, so that would be an example. If I wanted to erase that and draw a different one, that's potentially possible as well. Maybe I wanted to do this right here. Okay, so that could be a hydrogen bond as well. All right, sweet. Figured that out. That's good. All right. So these are, in addition to polarity, all the properties of water. Now, it might be a little bit different on that sheet that you're filling out. So if I go back just to polarity, I'll go back here. So water's polarity, what is an explanation of it? It's caused by the unequal sharing of electrons in a covalent bond. So in that water molecule, if I maybe go back to this picture, we have that oxygen in the middle that's unequally sharing those electrons with those two hydrogens. Okay. Now, why is that important to life? Well, it allows for the formation of hydrogen bonding. And what we'll learn in the rest of these properties of water is that those hydrogen bonds are what really makes them all work, allows them to happen. So what's the importance to life? Again, it allows for the formation of hydrogen bonds. And if you want to include which leads to the rest of the properties of water, you could. Very, very important. Water's polarity does not happen without hydrogen bonds. So this water's polarity is the most important one. It's also the one that students have most struggle with. If you have questions, please let me know on this because it's the most important one. All right, skipping ahead then. So cohesion. So next one on your list. Cohesion, what is it? Water molecules do exhibit this. It's the basically, if you wanted to put this in simple terms, it's water sticking to water. Water molecules sticking to water molecules. It's, well, again, allowed by hydrogen bonding, but water sticking to water is called cohesion. Due to hydrogen bonds, like molecules bonding to like molecules. Now, if we think back a little bit, why is that important to life? Well, couple things we'll get into. One is that it allows water to create surface tension. So surface tension, if I draw a beaker here, and it's got water in it. If we think about a water molecule that might be located here as opposed to on the surface, this water molecule has water molecules on all sides that it can bond to. But the ones at the surface can only bond to each other. There's nothing above them, right, other than air. So because of that, they bond to each other way stronger. It creates almost like a skin. It allows certain insects to live on the surface of water. You can even make a paper clip, and I like it looks like it's floating. It's not floating. It's basically suspended on the top of water because water has that surface tension. So again, cohesion. Why is it important? It allows water to have a surface tension. The other thing that cohesion does is it allows water to form spheres and droplets. Okay, so those droplets then can be used by organisms. Without that, water would not be able to be as useful to us as humans and living organisms. Adhesion is our next one. So adhesion it's similar to cohesion and it's related. Water molecules exhibit adhesion too. Water adhesion is basically water sticking to something else. So for instance, in the picture, you see water on a plant. Water sticking to something else is the explanation for adhesion. Now, if we talk about the importance to life, water can move up against gravity. In other words, it allows water to have what we call capillary action. So here's in the yellow is that how to spell that capillary action. And what it is, capillary action is actually allowed for because of cohesion and adhesion. Think about why on this. So in this picture here, right, we have a plant. So and we have one of the tiny tubes, and it's called xylem, scientific term, in a plant. And what that does is water is moving up that plant in this direction, right? So all these white dots are water molecules. Okay, and you can see that diagram here. It's water sticking to water, right? That's cohesion. But if you think about it, water also has to be able to stick to the wall of the plant. So both of those work together and allow a plant to bring water up and defy gravity. So that capillary action in plants allows them to be really tall. Look at this tree, so tall, right? That's allowed for by cohesion and adhesion. So again, importance of life for adhesion allows water to have capillary action. All right, then that just touches on surface tension again, showing that insect on the surface of water here. So explain how adhesion and cohesion work together to aid life. Normally we would do this in a pear deck. We're not going to do that right now. And I just explained that. It's capillary action. If you need to review that, go back to this slide right here. It explains it really nicely. All right, moderation of temperature is next. So on your sheet, it says resist temperature change. So water moderates the air temperature. And if I had a simple explanation of that, it just takes a lot of energy to raise the temperature of water or cool water down. If you think about a real world example of this, think about the temperature of Milwaukee compared to Beaver Dam. Milwaukee is right on Lake Michigan, huge body of water. Beaver Dam does not have that. I mean, you have a small lake, but nothing compared to Lake Michigan, right? And if we look at the temperature, both in the summer and the winter, there's differences. It might not be a ton, but there is differences. So when we have a really, really hot day in Wisconsin, it's going to be hotter in Beaver Dam than it is in Milwaukee. Reason being, Milwaukee has that water that's resisting temperature change, and it keeps it a little bit cooler. And vice versa in the winter. In the winter, when it gets super, super cold, it's probably going to be colder in Beaver Dam than it is in Milwaukee. And again, it's just because water is resisting that temperature change. Heat, how do we measure heat? It's a measure of kinetic energy, which is the measure of motion. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I don't think it'll be on your test. So hint there. High specific heat means that it minimizes temperature fluctuation. Basically, it's resisting temperature change. Okay, so if something has a high specific heat, which water does, we say it's resisting temperature change or minimizing temperature fluctuations. Okay, we just talked about that. Our next one is evaporative cooling, and on your sheet, that's going to be high heat of vaporization. And you've all experienced this. You might not have thought about it, but you've definitely experienced this. So evaporation is going from a liquid to a gas. This requires energy. Now, heat of vaporization is the quantity of heat that liquid must absorb in order to become a gas. So we can measure that. Now, water happens to have a high heat of vaporization. What does that mean? It means that water takes a lot of heat with it when it evaporates. Now, what that allows water to do is it allows us to cool a surface. Sweating is a classic example of that. Let me go back to just an explanation quick. So it says, what is the explanation of high heat of vaporization? Well, all you have to say is it takes a lot of heat. Water takes a lot of heat with it when it evaporates. The reason for that is, well, hydrogen bonds must be broken. But if you just have it takes a lot of heat with it when it evaporates, that'd be great. Now, the classic example of that is sweat cooling the body. So when you have water on the surface of your skin and sweat, when that evaporates, it's going to take some of your heat in your body with it and therefore cool your body off. This one allows for homeostasis. Okay, so explanation importance, it allows us to have evaporative cooling, cool our body by sweating, and that allows us, I would add this, make sure you add that, it helps us to maintain our homeostasis. Okay. Now, the next one we're going to go through is less dense as ice. So an example of this, and it's probably best if I just show you this diagram right here. If we look at this, we have water that is ice on the left and then liquid on the right. So what you'll notice is the distance between those water molecules is more spread out in the ice. So because of that, being more spread out, it's going to make it less dense. So your explanation for less dense as ice is the hydrogen bonds spread out when it freezes. And those hydrogen bonds spread out. It's actually one of the only liquids on the face of the earth that do this. Most things, when they get colder, get smaller. And okay, water doesn't follow that. Okay. Now, importance to life on this is going to allow all these creatures to live underneath the surface of water. Okay, all those things, and actually acts as an insulator. So insulation, okay, that actually keeps that water from freezing through. If the water froze all the way solid through, all those organisms that live underneath the surface would die. Because they're not freezing all the way through, and that ice is acting as an insulator, allows all that aquatic life to live underneath its surface. Okay, so that's your importance to life. Ice insulates and allows aquatic life to exist beneath it. So, see that kind of just a picture of life underneath the water, or underneath the ice, I should say. All right, solvent of life. So this is called high solubility. Water is known as the universal solvent. I would write that down. Water is known as the universal solvent. What that basically means is it allows it to pull apart really any ionic compound. Anything that is polar, water can break down things like sugars, things like salts, break down very, very easily in water. Okay, and that is really important because if you think about it, most of your body is made out of water. High percentage of your body is made out of water. And if you think about a specific example of that, water is a key component of your blood. Okay, so by having water in our blood, it allows our bloodstream to transport all those nutrients that you broke down in your digestive properties or in your digestive tract. Okay, it's going to allow water to absorb it and move and transfer that all throughout your body. Okay, so let's go through your chart here. Explanation: high solubility. It allows the water to pull apart or break down ionic compounds. And the importance to life: it allows blood to transport nutrients. So this is another example. Proteins, which is part of your diet. Polar compounding. You can see in this picture that water is helping to break that protein down. Okay, moving on. Just to touch on this briefly, hydrophilic and hydrophobic. If we break these words down, I'm going to help this. If you think hydro, so the first part of these is hydro. Hydro means water. Okay, water. Now, you might not know what philic means, but if you think of phobic, like a phobia, what we have here, and I wrote that really horribly, water. You think of phobia, you think of fear. So water fearing is literally how I translate hydrophobic. Now, on the other hand, if something is hydrophilic, philic is an old, I believe it's a Greek or Latin term that literally means loving. That would be something good to know. Hydrophilic, water loving. Hydrophobic, water fearing. And if we look below, hydrophobic things are things like non-polar items like lipids, fats. Okay, those are water fearing. Things like butter and oil would be water fearing. They don't mix with water, versus a hydrophilic thing has an affinity for water. These are usually polar. Now, if you remember back what polarity is, you have a charge, plus, minus, right? So sugars, proteins, salts all have those charges, and therefore water can break them down. Now, but water can also, right, it cannot mix with oil. So our next property is going to be water cannot mix with oil. Now, if we think about an explanation for that, well, water is polar, oil is non-polar, and they can't mix. So polar and non-polar things cannot mix is an explanation. Now, an importance to life, well, one thing about that is a lipid, let me see if it's, all right. One thing that's a lipid, you probably remember this term from when you were a freshman, it's called a phospholipid. And those make up cell membranes. And cell membranes are a very important part of a living organism. So what that allows a cell to do, this is your importance to life for does not mix with oil. This allows a cell to create a barrier, only allowing so much water in. For instance, an organism that lives in water doesn't allow too much water to come in. If you don't live in water, you don't want to let that water out. Phospholipids are what allow that cell to have that barrier and be able to control basically how much water is getting in or out. Okay. So solute concentration in aqueous solutions, if we were looking at that, we would be looking at solute concentration versus how much is inside the cell, and we can basically determine how much water is going to go in or out. We let's not worry about that too much right now. We'll look at that more when we look at cell membrane. All right, if you go to the other side of your chart, it might be on the back side of yours. pH is neutral, is what we're going to talk about now. So with acids and bases, you should know by now in your science careers that acids and bases deal with pH, acids having a pH of below 7, pH above 7, and 7 being neutral, while water is actually right in the middle, right at 7. So pure water has a pH of 7. And that allows us to help to maintain our homeostasis. Let me just explain this a little bit. One thing about water, it has equal amounts of hydrogen ion. So hydrogen ion, writing tool here. Hydrogen ion is that, right? Hydrogen ion. And hydroxide ion. So hydroxide would be this. So when water dissociates, it will become hydrogen ion and hydroxide ion. Now, if you're acidic, you have a lot of this. So if you're acidic, you have a lot of that. Well, if you're basic, you have a lot of this. Okay. So that's kind of how we measure that. Well, water, being right in the middle, has equal amounts of hydrogen ion and hydroxide. That is your explanation for pH is neutral. So I'll say it again. Our explanation for pH is neutral is water has equal amounts of hydrogen ion and hydroxide ion. Hydrogen ion, hydroxide ion. Okay. And changes in this in a real live organism are huge. So water helps to neutralize both acids and bases, and pH change is hugely important in organisms. Let me give you an example of that. In humans, your blood maintains a pH of about 7.35. Okay. And your body needs to be able to keep it in that range. If it gets to 7.4, you're dead. If it gets to 7.3, again, you're dead. So your body has to maintain that narrow range for homeostasis, and water helps that to happen. So, again, its importance to life, water can neutralize both acids and bases, and it's important because pH change can have huge impacts on living organisms and their homeostasis. I'm going to skip ahead here. I already mentioned this, and you should know about the pH scale. Oh, one thing, that is important to detail about the pH scale is that it is logarithmic. And what that means is, as you see here in that third bullet point, says a difference of 10 times the concentrations. So what that means is if I go from a pH of 6, so if I started at a pH of 6 and I go down to a 5, that 5 is 10 times more acidic than the 6. And if it goes down to a 4, it would be 10 times 10. So 100 times more acidic. 4 is 100 times more acidic than 6. Okay, so that's what we would call logarithmic. All right. So I'm skipping ahead. Buffers basically just help to minimize pH change. We're not going to go real in depth on that in this class. You take chemistry, my AP Chem maybe goes into buffers more. All right, so I think that really covers all of us. Another real world example of acids and pH change causing a problem with organisms would be acid rain. If you have a lot of acid rain falling on on an ecosystem, it really has harmful effects on a lot of those living organisms, specifically plants and aquatic life, because organisms are so sensitive to that pH change. So that's just a picture of that. And then this is just a review video. Okay, so highly recommend that you watch that. If we were in class, we would be watching that. So watch it. Do yourself a favor, take that time and watch that link. All right, now if we were in class, we would be doing this. If you are really struggling right now, come see me, shoot me an email. We can set something up. Now, the rest of these are just pictures. And by looking at this picture, if we were in class, I'd be asking you, okay, well, what property of water do you think that picture is representing best? Okay, so if I were to look at this one, well, I'm seeing water forming a sphere. I'm seeing water sticking to water. Cohesion is what I would say for this one. So on the next ones, I'm just going to pause about 5-10 seconds, and then you should be able to figure out. So if we look at this picture, what property of water is that? And hopefully you said water is less dense as an ice. So you see the ice floating in the picture. And in this picture, we see water forming a sphere there, water sticking to water. You should have said cohesion. This picture, what we see is water sticking to a plant. So that would be adhesion, water sticking to something else. All right, in this picture, not entirely clear, but what they're trying to show you is, let me grab my pen here. This line is water, and this line is sand. And what they're showing you is they heated both of them up. And if you look, again, water resisted temperature change. Versus when they heated that sand up, it shot up in a hurry. Okay, so they're showing water's resistance to temperature change there. Now this one is a sweet picture. So this one shows water's surface tension, which is a property of cohesion. So if you said surface tension or cohesion, I would say either one. Notice the water doesn't break over the swimmer's head. It's pretty crazy. Okay, so for this one, what we have is that negative oxygen, those two positive hydrogens, and that is showing polarity. Oxygen is hogging electrons, making it negative because electrons have a negative charge. Another sweet picture. So again, this one is surface tension or cohesion, water sticking to water. So this one is water's high solubility. There's a lot of water in that coffee or tea, whatever that is, and it's dissolving, likely sugar in this case. And on this one, hopefully this one was obvious as well. Water does not mix with oil. Water being polar does not mix with the non-polar oil. Allows cells to create barriers. And then here we have water's surface tension again, which is a property of cohesion, allowing that insect to live on the surface. And with that, that's it for that water presentation. So that's your chapter 3 lecture. Feel free to break that up.